Welcome to the European Health Forum at Gastein. Now, this is one of those sessions where I suspect there may be an age divide. Some of you may recall the famous quotation from Groucho Marx when something was being explained to him and he was told, a 10-year-old child could understand this. To which he quite reasonably said, somebody find a 10-year-old child, because we are going to be moving into a world where people of my generation are struggling to come to grips with what's actually happening. And in preparation for this, I was looking at the website of one of our panelists, looking at gaming, and the whole array of gaming. Thank God for Google Translate, because it was in Swedish, and jag förstår inte svenska. But it was a wealth of things that one could do. And I was wondering, if you do all these things, how do you get time to do anything else? But as you pointed out, it is work for you. So we're going to be moving into an online world, and we're going to be looking at this digital environment and its impact on health, good and bad. Now, we all know that social media has become an integral part of our lives. In some cases, we feel as if we're addicted to it. Now, recently, I have broken one bit of that addiction. I have moved off X because of the venomous hatred that is being promoted by Elon Musk. I still have an account, but I'm not posting. I'm using Blue Sky instead, which at the minute seems to be a bit better. But we all know that social media does offer a lot of benefits. During the pandemic, it was a great source of information. It was also a great source of disinformation. And there are a lot of ways in which it helps to make connections for people. It provides platforms for self-expression. People can publish in a way, just think of the way you can get your messages across. Remember that Van Gogh sold one painting in his lifetime. Think of what he could have done if he had had then Twitter, Instagram, whatever. You know, it would have been, he probably wouldn't have ended his life so prematurely and all of that. It creates communities. But the other hand, we know it also creates challenges. Issues like cyberbullying, anxiety, depression, and exposure to inappropriate content. So we've been really fortunate in having a fantastic panel of experts, all younger than me, which is good, to delve into these complex dynamics, to share their insights, and to discuss how we can maximize the benefits and minimize the harms. So I'm going to start off by introducing our plenary speaker, who is someone who can share their experiences of working with young people. And this is Conor Warren. Conor is the Chief Executive Officer of Spark UK. Conor is, and you've agreed that I can say this, an 18-year-old mental health advocate, a founder and CEO of Spark UK, one of the UK's only youth-led mental health organisations. Now, Spark UK focuses on creating a range of resources, of campaigns, and lessons for schools and for young people across the UK. And what they try to do, what they do, in fact, is to make mental health education accessible and relatable to young people, making sure that conversations about mental health are normalised and encouraged. Conor, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. As Martin said, my name is Conor Warren, and I'm an 18-year-old mental health advocate and entrepreneur. At the age of 14, I founded Spark UK, and we are now the UK's leading youth-led mental health organisation. We create resources and campaigns around mental wellbeing for thousands of young people across the UK. We've worked with the likes of Dame Emma Thompson, Dame Judi Dench, Stephen Fry, all sending us videos giving tips on mental health. And our resources are now being used in over 300 schools across the UK. I'm here today to share my perspective as a young person, but also as an individual who works with young people and whose organisation focuses on promoting mental health conversations and education within UK schools. One of the biggest challenges I see for my age is managing the transition between the school environment, where interaction with friends and many other aspects of life is largely digital, to the world as a young adult, where face-to-face interaction begins to become more essential, for example, when you're entering the workplace. I know many young people, including a lot of my close friends, who at simple activities such as writing an email to someone they don't know, talking to a bus driver, making small talk with strangers, they can find that really difficult, and it can often lead to feelings of nervousness and anxiety. Taking this a step further, For a lot of young people, visiting a GP or accessing face-to-face mental health services are considered a challenge, but especially a situation where you are expected to be emotionally vulnerable or to talk about your own personal health issues. Personally, I've received professional support from the NHS in the UK for my own mental health struggles, and I found it extremely difficult to talk to a professional face-to-face about my own issues. Because of social media, I was only used to speaking to my friends over message about my issues. That actually being presented with someone face-to-face, I found that really difficult to actually know where to start, to put it bluntly. So the challenge seems to be developing confidence in this area, while still living the majority of social interaction online, alongside promoting services that don't follow the traditional face-to-face model, but using the platforms that are most popular, such as social media, to sort of create that support. Some great examples of this are text messaging services for mental health support, as well as health sort of online doctors. And you've also got online crisis support lines and services. Over in the UK, we see so many young people who are accessing services such as Childline, which is an online wellbeing support. And we see so many young people that access that, and that actually saves so many lives because it is at the touch of fingertips, and it means they don't have to talk to an adult about it. One of the messages that I believe needs to be heard is that social media is here to stay. Unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. We are now stuck with social media, and it's only going to develop from here, and it's only going to become more integrated into our everyday life. Social media is a key pillar of my life. As much as I hate to admit that, unfortunately it is. And it's a key pillar for the social lives of millions of young people across the UK and across the world. For me, it's a positive place both personally and professionally. I have used social media to build my platform and to grow my organisation. Living in a small town in the UK, I didn't get much diversity. I wasn't exposed to much. So social media allowed me to really see things that I wouldn't necessarily see just in my everyday life. It has introduced a level of diversity that isn't present in small towns, offering young people experiences of inclusivity and diversity. This is especially beneficial for those from marginalised groups related to race or sexuality. As a gay teenager myself, the only place I saw someone like me was on social media and through social media, because I didn't see that in my local community. And I feel this is an important factor to stress when we're asking young people to reflect on social media. You know, it's not all negative. A lot of people like to say it's all negative, but in reality, social media has so many positives. And with this in mind, one of the key actions that we as an organisation feel is important, especially when we're talking to the young people we work with, is teaching the ability to critically appraise social media and the content they're looking at. With this comes an element of trust that they can do it, that they have the right tools to do it, they have the right support and knowledge with those around them. I always like to say that to a large extent, social media is yours. You choose what accounts you follow, you choose what accounts you engage with. So I always like to say, let's have less of the Love Island influencers and more of the self-care accounts, because the more positive accounts you follow, the more positive your social media is going to become. One key element of the work we do at Spark UK is to teach mental well-being from as young as possible. So we do lessons from as young as 4 or 5-year-olds all the way to 20-year-olds. And we aim to teach young people about mental well-being and embedding elements of self-care and gratitude into their lives. So it builds up a generation who are able to support themselves in the future. From a digital perspective, we should look at using similar techniques, addressing the problems before they become a problem. Additionally, young people are looking for content that is authentic and is transparent, content that adds value to their lives. But maybe this raises the question of how platforms ensure to the best of their ability that they are supporting authentic and factually correct content by standing against discrimination and promoting equity. If I choose a film to watch, the age rating gives me a clue as to the type of content that's in it, and this builds more transparency around what I'm watching. And we need to sort of build this into advertising, educational videos, entertainment. This approach of rating content on social media provides the tool I mentioned in terms of supporting people to critically appraise content and gives parents and educators the reassurance of the content their young people are watching. As I previously said, authenticity is a crucial thing that young people want in the digital world. Apps such as TikTok and BeReal have provided an outlet for authentic connections through the digital space. For those of you that haven't heard of BeReal, it's a social media app where a notification goes off once a day, and it gives users 2 minutes to take a picture of basically whatever they're doing, and it takes a picture using the front camera and the back camera. I'm somewhat proud, somewhat embarrassed. I have not missed a day of BeReal in 2 years, which is somewhat of an accomplishment. And it's a sort of this unique platform that there's no creators, there wasn't any adverts. It was a space just for friends where there was no filters. It was a truly authentic space without filters or fakeness. And this is what young people are truly wanting within the digital world, somewhere authentic that is real. Maybe returning to the thoughts about inclusivity, young people are probably the most proficient users of social media. So ensuring young people are consulted in the designing of services would be a massive recommendation. We should be working alongside young people to find solutions rather than against them, as after all, young people are our future. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So much to talk about, and we will be discussing that among our wonderful panel, and I'd like to invite them to come up one by one. Aya, could you join us here? Aya Winssi is the project leader from Sverok. And this is the website that I was looking at, learning all about gaming and the huge range. So this is, please have a seat. You're the project leader for for Sverok, part of the Swedish Gaming Association, one of the largest youth organizations in Sweden. And you work with spreading different parts of the gaming culture across the country. You've got 40,000 members and 1,800 clubs, both in person and online. In Sweden, people like to join things, don't they? Choirs, now gaming associations. So here we are. And you've led a number of different projects working with extremism, with racism and toxicity in gaming and gaming-adjacent platforms, and the impact that it has had on youth and children. And your work includes analysing and reporting on how extremist actors can exploit gaming spaces and report on the experience of young gamers. So welcome to Aya. Thank you. Kathrin. Kathrin Karsay is Assistant Professor, please, at the Department of Communication at the University of Vienna. And your work has been exploring and researching and sharing knowledge on how to successfully navigate the digital world, coming at it from an academic perspective and with very rigorous research. Gottschalk. Gigi is the head of health in YouTube Germany. And the fact that YouTube has a head of health, I think is really important, because there are a lot of other organizations that have an impact on health but don't have a head of health. So you've been very prominent in digital health, and you've been focusing on enhancing the accessibility and credibility of health information, a challenging task indeed. And you work with the WHO, with the US National Academy of Medicine and others, and your work is considered pivotal in implementing initiatives like YouTube Health, which aims to provide users with reliable, evidence-based health content. And then we have András Kulja, please. András is a Hungarian politician, a doctor, and a social media personality, an influencer. You became a member of the European Parliament. I mean, you've covered the whole range, haven't you? And, but you were concerned about what you saw as some of the shortcomings of the Hungarian health system, so you moved into politics. And you got this huge following on TikTok. So that's where to be if you want to be an influencer, where he shares health education content, and particularly during the COVID pandemic. And you're now the Vice President of the Parliament's Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, and deeply committed to addressing disparities. And Conor, can I ask you do you want to join us as well? Bring you back up again. Thank you very much indeed. So, Aya, let me start with you. You've heard from Conor about the challenges that young people are facing in the online world. Where does gaming fit into this? And again, we're thinking in this session of how do we maximize the benefits for health and minimize the risks. Can gaming help us to do that?
Well, I think it's important to consider that gaming is also a social platform. A lot of games do have a place where you can interact with other players, where you can socialize, where you can talk about your interests and your hobbies. And just as Conor said, social media in games, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So I think it's time to accept that we have to adapt, or the older generation has to adapt to what is happening, because social media platform and gaming platforms are so important for a lot of young people, and the way that they interact and the way that they create, well, a social environment.
So
yeah.
let's have a concrete example.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm cautious even about saying this, but you know the way in which people can sometimes use social media literally to encourage people to harm themselves. Does that ever happen in gaming, on online gaming? Is that a thing? Or harm other people? Because, you know, I look at gaming and, you know, I know nothing about it, but you seem to have an awful lot of games where the intention is to kill people, you know, or to steal cars or do something like that. Am I just, you know, is this just my age and I've misunderstood it?
Well, those are some games, of course, but that is not everything. I think people who are aiming to harm others is something that can happen in any space. It's not just in the online space. So I think it's a bit of a misconception. Of course, that is happening as well, and that is something that we have to be aware of. But if you can just repeat your question just once again.
Yeah, so I'm just really interested in this idea that you can get into an online world where you can go into battle and kill people, and then they sort of get up again and recover in some mysterious way without the intervention.
We have to remember,
missing it?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of, again, a lot of games are designed for learning and for creativity and to learn different languages. I mean, that's one of the ways that I learned English, for example, by playing different games. We have games such as Roblox, which is also like a social media platform that a lot of young people are using to communicate and to create friends. We have to remember that these spaces, these are open online spaces that are meant to be positive and an open environment. However, there are people abusing these spaces. These spaces are not meant to be used this way. So but they are used to abuse.
Just for the sake of argument and for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not. But if I was a neo-Nazi, for example, and I decided I was wanting to design a game to encourage other people to be neo-Nazis, could I do it?
I think that's the wrong way to look at it.
Okay.
Because, I mean, recruitment and things, right-wing extremism is happening everywhere. This is not only in online spaces. There are political parties, there are ideologies that have been around for centuries. This is not a new phenomenon. But they are abusing these spaces because there are a lot of young people on social media and in gaming spaces right now. I mean, I think 90% of young people are using social media or gaming platforms in some way to communicate. But we have to remember that games are, I mean, we have 40,000 members because of a reason. And that reason is because games are fun, they're a way to interact, they're a way of learning. We have a way of organizing people in a democratic way that is also working to prevent these types of events from happening, this type of right-wing extremism or other types of extremism.
Or any type of extremism. So let's come back to that one later. So Kathrin, you've been researching these issues and you listened to what Conor was saying. What's your response in terms of the academic research that might help might inform the work that he's been doing?
Yeah, just one follow-up on the game industry. So the game industry is huge. I mean, it's bigger than film and music industry together. Just not forget that. I mean, this is a massive thing, and it's not that recent, actually. So I know some married couples who met over an MMO. So this is, and I'm not 18. Well, but let's talk about research. So first of all, I really want to highlight and acknowledge the complexity when we talk about media effects. So there is not a uniform media effect, and especially not a social media effect, as maybe some very populist authors would recently claim. So we have a lot of complexity in that sense. There's different platforms, there's different types of use, there's different type of content, and we have social, environmental, and psychological factors determining how those effects look like. that makes social media research a very complex issue. So that's just what I want to say first. But elaborating on this complexity, I wanted to follow up on Conor's thoughts about mental health. So that's what we really see. In the last decade, there has been an increase of awareness of mental health, especially among youth. I would not claim that there is a growing concern. So at least the data I know don't tell that, but there's definitely growing awareness. And for example, I think it has been propelled by the pandemic, and the World Health Organization has taken important measures to prioritize this issue. And this also led to a growing mental health awareness efforts. We know that these are important because they can increase mental health literacy, they lead to destigmatization and earlier diagnosis. And we also see a shift on social media. So there is a more positive discussion around mental health when we compare to traditional media and how mental health has been displayed. And because those affected, those with those lived experiences, are able to share their experiences themselves, and we see a lot of community, we see a lot of hope, we see a lot of stories of overcoming, and a lot of information sharing and information seeking. And this is important to mention. So youth turns to social media, especially to get information. Beside those benefits, of course, there's pitfalls. We see questionable accuracy of information. Not everyone is an expert, not everyone is a doctor. And there's very competing interests. Very often there's monetary interests. And I would even go as far in saying that mental health or health in general is a business model for many influencers. Yeah. So when we did our research very recently in Austria, we asked 1,000 people between the age of 15 and 25. 75% say they are following influencers, but they also estimate that 50% of their content they see on social media is created by influencers. 30% say they follow health influencers specifically, although we know especially with mental health, it's also the lifestyle influencers talking about mental health. Why? Because when we talk to influencers, they tell us it's clickable content. It provides drive. So they get more, basically more reactions. So it's also a popular thing. And so there I see one last comment on that. So we also see that 30% indicated that they bought a product because an influencer recommended it for health purposes. So this is quite a common issue, and I would like to see more regulation at place when it comes to influencers talking about health in general and promoting products.
So it's really interesting trying to disentangle all these things. As you were talking, I was thinking of an example from when Donald Trump was being elected in 2016, and there was a group of young people in Flores in Macedonia who were pumping out a lot of pro-Trump material. Mm-hmm. And the initial thought was that they were doing it because they'd monetarized it because of the clickbait. You know, they were linking through and they were making several $100s a week or a bit more than that. And then it was discovered that the Russian military intelligence, the GRU, had been visiting there, probably picking up on it. And you're trying to make sense of all of these things because people have multiple motivations for doing these things. And sometimes, as you were saying, an influencer who's really promoting a lifestyle might find it's more profitable to promote a positive or a negative health message. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree. And in general, there's a myriad of sources on social media. It's not only influencers, it's general users, it's NGOs, health organizations, journalists, alternative media. And we don't really know what they are saying and the quality. So that's also a call for research to investigate what kind of messages they are and how accurate they are.
So I've got lots of other questions, which I hope we'll come back to in the discussion afterwards. But Gigi, let me move on to you. Can you've got a huge amount of health-related material on YouTube, and I have to say, one of my colleagues has a channel there who has monetized it and does really interesting stuff on epidemiological methods and writing papers and so on, and it's quite lucrative actually. But you got all that, and that I think is good material. But how do you differentiate the good from the bad, and particularly when you're getting into contested issues? You know, you look back to the pandemic, and there were so many people saying one thing and so many people saying the other, even when the evidence was, very clear. But on the online world, it seemed to be much more divided than it really was. I mean, how do you do that? You're head of health. Do you have a team of health professionals advising you? Do you rely on ChatGPT and Wikipedia? Do you have... You do. We'll come back to that in a minute, actually. Just remember the word autophagy, eating yourself. We'll come back to that one. Gigi, how do you do it?
So I think the question now is, in a nicely way, asking how does the world work?
Or how does YouTube prevent people from...
I'm happy to speak on YouTube Health and what the thought was behind it from the starting point that you're coming from. So, of course, everybody probably knows search in Google is the biggest search engine used at the moment on the planet, but YouTube is the second biggest search engine. And to give you some numbers, because of course we are a company that cares for data a little bit, is and you give me time when I'm getting too long-winded, is as we're in the European, let me give you a global number. Health content videos, where people seek out videos on health conditions. What is the symptoms of diabetes? What is a polycystic kidney disease? What is an anxiety disorder? Only that type of content, only on YouTube, last year, 300 billion views, out of which I own in Germany 3 billion views. So there is a vast interest on health condition information. A lot of people speak about Dr. Google. So the first thing to know is there was never a plan at Google headquarters to say, let's make Dr. Google. These queries, which is searches in our language, just keep piling up. So we have, in Google, there's a vast part that is Google Health, where health professionals work there, the likes of yourself, academia, researchers, all the different things you know and don't know Google does has a health aspect to it. Let's keep it health information quality on YouTube. So what we did 4 years ago during the pandemic, as you mentioned, where we saw a lot of medical misinformation also, aside from using the local media law, child protection law, platform rules, we needed more, because health information is a lot more granular and a lot more fine, and it follows different things than regular information. So we said we need third-party evaluation, because we don't want to be judge and jury what is the good or the bad stuff, unless it's obviously bad stuff that doesn't need an argument. And then we reached out to the WHO and said, can you, with other expert groups, define indicators that let us understand what is considered a credible source of health information on the internet, and by which real-life health credibility and standards, and by which health information quality standards? We talked about evidence-based. And then these white papers were done, and then we used those to create the YouTube Health features that now, and I can follow up in the next question, will show you underneath the video of an authoritative source. I come from in Berlin, where everybody probably knows Charité Hospital.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when their channel shows up, under each video of their channel, there will be a badge that says, this is from a public hospital in Germany. And if you want to know how the WHO defines such a source, click here. And then now you have contextual information on the source of the information.
So the problem
First
there,
part of the answer.
you take, going back to the pandemic, WHO initially said that COVID is not airborne. And it continued to say COVID is not airborne way beyond the time that everybody else knew that it was airborne. So in a way, you get authoritative sources. And we're in the UK having a COVID inquiry at the minute, where you are having people appear before it saying things that actually are out of alignment with what the consensus view is. So just because you come from a prestigious organization doesn't mean you get it right. Isn't that a challenge?
I think it's a challenge, but it also should remind us all that during the pandemic, people got scientific information and evidence-based information, but nobody gave them the disclaimer of how does science work in health and how that how does evidence work? And you all are in the field of evidence, so you know evidence has to be revised on each health topic in regular cycles because evidence gets progresses. So nobody told people, hey, when we talk about the facts and evidence, we're talking about evidence being a moving target. So people thought it was put into stone what had been said by this organization while the evidence was still forming. So this is something that we probably need to look at as some of the issues.
Sure. Now, you've been working on getting your algorithms to prioritize the sort of better information and deprioritize some of the less good information. How do you do that without getting into too many technical details about algorithms?
Okay, let me be as untechnical as possible to still get the point across.
Sure.
So the first layer is, you have, as we said, we have a local law, and in health we have a lot of regulation on any type of information as it comes to advertisement, all of these things that are in place from the regulatory bodies. That is also on the platform. Then you look at the general evidence, and then you also look at as you said, the WHO came to a point where there was moving. So what we are trying to do first is we apply what is there and have also platform rules. So then we go law, local law, regional law, local law, platform rules, and then we have remove content, reduce content that is on the fence, raise content that is proper, and reward content that is so good that it could be monetizing. And then for health, we put another layer on top that I just tried to explain briefly. The technicalities of this is very complex, but then you have trusted flagger, third-party organizations that go through the platform and say, this is the bad stuff, you need to remove it. Then we have the government organizations. Then we have human review inside the company. And then we have the technical review, machine learning.
Just let's do a thought experiment where which I'm not, Elon Musk. And would he not say, it's all right for you to say that, but that's censorship. You are censoring people who have a right to say that black is white and the earth is flat and, whatever else. How do you defend yourself from that allegation? Because, that is an increasing view in parts of the political spectrum.
To be honest, I think we don't, first of all, I wouldn't try to defend it.
Yeah.
Because if the earth indeed is flat, somebody would have to walk a long while until he drops off and hurts himself. But if we're saying you should abort with a, with a kitchen knife because the law in your country changed on abortion, that's immediately hurtful. So there is a confidence score that we can look at and say, is this immediately hurtful? So we can risk taking it off and then go to court about, freedom of speech issues, and then local legislation, local courts will decide if it was correct to remove or we have to re-put it. But, falling from the flat earth is a different threat than candy for diabetes.
Okay, so András, let's move to you. You are an influencer, as I've said. So how do you use your position as an influencer as a power for good?
A hard question. We all agree that social media can play a crucial role in informing opinion of public, and I think the health communication will become an increasingly important topic in the future. And one of the reasons, it is one of the reasons I started my channel. But I want to mention that we see physicians, healthcare workers, that there are more and more treatments and preventive vaccines for more and more diseases, and we see at the same time the growing skepticism about these treatments, and that people start to refuse these. So we can easily find ourselves in a situation where the treatments are available, and the question is not the problem is not the availability, but the willingness and acceptance of these treatments. So my personal experience, first my experience, because I started my career as a psychiatry resident and I switched to surgery, so I realized surgeons don't really like to talk to patients so much as psychiatrists and psychologists.
Anesthetists are even worse.
And people have a great need for information. They want to know what will happen to them, to their body. And I think health-related questions affect. Is it working? Yeah, I hope so. Will affect sooner or later everybody. And during the pandemic, I just realized that it's not only a need, but also it can be a threat to healthcare system because the misinformations are spreading so fast that we can do nothing about this. And it was the main motivation to start my TikTok channel, and I was very surprised that it just blew up, and now I have 370,000 followers and more than 100 million views. And that's not because my channel is so super cool, but because there is a very big need for an understandable and evidence-based information in the public, and it is how I started my channel. And we must mention that the big brands and companies are using the social media for advertisement, using more than conventional and all the advertisement methods, because it's much more effective. So we must follow the trends. We cannot prohibit to use social media to search for health-related questions, because people want to know everything about their problems, diseases, about their treatments, and they want to know immediately, as soon as possible. So the only thing we can do as healthcare workers, follow the trends and help to the next generation of healthcare workers to educate and give to people the health, the science and evidence-based health information. But it is very important not just talk about facts and evidence-based thing, but to talk in an understandable way. We must find the keywords and the technique to reach the people, even those who believe in some strange things like the flat earthers and other communities, because we must talk to them, but not to lecture them, but help to understand the healthcare, the motivation, even the motivation of healthcare workers, and the science behind the treatments and new medicines.
Great, thanks. So I've got more questions for you we'll come back to in the general discussion. But meanwhile, Jaisalmer has been collecting the questions from the online audience. So have you got a couple that you think are particularly interesting that we can share with our panel here?
Yes, we have quite a few questions. So maybe we can start with one that is kind of a summary of some of the things that have been coming up in the chat. So many of you have been talking about credibility and transparency. What are the factors that strengthen credibility in social media? And also, do you think that these are different in different subgroups of the population? So, for example, by age, gender, socioeconomic background, country?
Okay, let me pick up on one particular thing, because I'm interested in the academic research on this. You said by gender. So one of the things that's happening worldwide, if people who read the Financial Times will know, John Byrne-Murdoch's been talking about it, young people without a degree are diverging massively in their views between males and females. So essentially, young women are aspiring, moving upwards, becoming more liberal, becoming more engaged, and so on. And young men without a degree are basically going the other way, which is why you get the gender gap in the polling in the United States, why you get it in the election in Germany, in the regional elections. We'll see in Austria next week. So we've got lots of evidence of that. So what that tells me is that credibility is not necessarily a function of the source of information, but is a property of the recipient of that information. And what is credible for some people will be incredible for others. But let me start with you, Kathrin. What's the evidence on that? And then we'll move across to all of you, in fact.
Yeah, so I really like how you phrased it. Basically, that meaning is happening within the user, let's say this, or within the audience. But there's also factors we can identify that promote, let's say, authenticity or credibility. Well, one of those factors are homophily, basically being very similar to the person. And this is one key aspect. Like many of the influencers are young, so there's an experience.
Or what they aspire to.
Yes, of course. There's this aspiration aspect, of course, but they are very often role models. So they became the new pop stars, and they receive a lot of attention, a lot of likes, and this is based on very simple cognitive theory. Like, we believe this is a role modeling, and this is how we learn, and this is inspiring. But we see some factors. So one of them is, of course, similarity to some extent. But there's also other factors which I'm not fully aware of.
So there's a lot of work, a book by a guy called Drew Weston from Emory, a book called The Political Brain, and this came about after 2004 in the US election. And at that time you had John Kerry, a decorated Vietnam veteran who was portrayed by the Swift Boat veterans as a coward, basically. And you had George W. Bush, who had dodged the draft and was pictured flying onto an aircraft carrier and is seen as a war hero. And a lot of research was done to see why did people see them differently? And what they found was that using both psychometric tests and also PET scanning of the brain, people presented with exactly the same information who they'd pre-divided into registered Republicans or Democrats took a completely different message from it. So, Conor, you wanted to come in on this, and which particular aspect? Was it the gender, or was it?
It was the point you just made about the Financial Times article.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing in general. To start with, I do not have a degree. I have no plans on getting a degree. As an 18-year-old, I have no plans of going to university. I did not do well at school at all. And I've got many, many friends who are both at university and are not at university, and their aspirations are very high. So I don't necessarily agree with that point, that sort of between the gender gaps, between the degrees and non-degree.
I'm just reporting the empirical data.
And
so
then
there are.
From the influencer point of view as well, I think going back by what is sort of reliable when young people are looking at the work, so where we work very well as an organisation is I am 18. All of our young people in our organisation, every member of our team is between 16 and 25. So the resources that we are putting out there are reliable for young people because we are their own age. We are going through the same thing that they're going through. And so that's where that credibility comes in, is that age aspect of young people are more likely to listen to people their own age.
So let me just push you on that. Is there an ethnicity issue here? Or how do you address that?
I think for us as an organisation, we are from a very rural part of the UK. We don't have much ethnic diversity. We are a completely white organisation. That is not out of choice. That is out of just the matter of fact of that how it is. And so we've never found that an issue. We've never found that as an issue of our credibility. We are still engaging with young people of all cultures, of all diversities, of all ethnic backgrounds because of the age. And it's that one factor that is a thing that has given us that credibility with the young people as opposed to teachers.
So in several of the countries, in fact, I think all of the countries here, including the one that I live in, there are issues around ethnic and religious diversity. And there are groups of people who, many of us would argue, very reasonably do not trust their governments, because their governments have, or their politicians have attacked them, have vilified them. And if you are trying to get messages across, who is trusted in a situation like that, where you have got very good personal grounds for not trusting others? Well, let's just go through all of you. So let me start with Hungary. I mean, you know, your Prime Minister has had lots of slogans written up, you know, in English telling migrants to go home. Or in Hungarian, I beg your pardon, in Hungarian. Not that many migrants would speak Hungarian, I suspect.
I want to highlight that I'm from an opposite party, so I'm not a part of the government, just to be clear. Yes, I think these actions can destroy the credibility, even the credibility of professionals, health professionals, because they use, for example, not only in Hungary but in other countries, some leaders use the pandemic as a political tool. And I think it had a very devastating effect on the credibility of healthcare workers, and I think it's a very important issue. And just to mention that you won't be credible because you have a degree or you achieve something. The credibility is an achievement. You must build up the trust, and it is why wasn't successful when health professionals and microbiologists just started to talk about pandemic, because sorry, the publicity in the publicities in their heads was the question. So who is this guy or who is she? And the influencers are much more credible to some people because they know what are they doing in their daytime, what are the hobbies and motivation, and it is 30% of people about health products advertised by influencers. So we have to build up the trust, and it is how we can build up the credibility. And it is why we must think a little bit forward, think about the problems and find some solutions, new policies to take actions to prepare our healthcare system. Sorry, I focus on is on the healthcare, to prepare our healthcare system.
So this role of an influencer is hugely important. It's been estimated, if my memory serves me right, that Taylor Swift's endorsement of Donald Trump has delivered about 400,000 votes, partly by encouraging people to register. How do you and YouTube get Kim Kardashian to promote a health message? Or someone similar? You've got another influencer here you might want to recruit, I should add.
I think I wanted to bring it back to one part that's part of the underlying question about representation.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the magics of platforms, also like YouTube, where you get, and when you think of it as in a health context, when you have underserved communities within countries, we tapped into migration, all of these things. Sometimes they have no place where they can get information that helps them along in their health journey in that part of the world they live in, because their community is not acknowledged. You said a racial issue, a skin issue. So now we see a phenomenon where we have credible health creators, doctors on the internet, that at the same time as they're doctors, they represent the minority. We can think of Dr. Simi, Nigerian descent doctor in the UK NHS, does female health. She now is at 3 million followers across the globe, which is black women that in many places of this earth, or especially in Europe, are a very underserved community. You can also think of Arabic women living in Europe, where the simple thought of going to a gynecologist is absolutely culturally unthinkable. So now we can reach these people. So representation is a huge issue, and I think I wouldn't go as even need to go as far as looking at Kim Kardashian, because we have Dr. Mike, who has now 12 to 15 million followers as a medical doctor, and he can make that message, or Dr. Simi can make the message, sure, because she is a gynecologist.
So symbolic representation is really important. Again, Swedish Democrats, Freedom Party, whoever, both of you are in countries where there are challenges too. I mean, we all are. Everybody is facing this at the minute.
Yeah, well, I cannot address the political challenge here, but from the data we have, we know that youth still trusts a lot the health organization and healthcare practitioners, even more so than general influencers, and even more though the influencers they follow. So when we talk about percentage rates, trust is there at agreeing and trusting to some extent is at around 70% when we talk about healthcare organizations and practitioners. And for those influencers they follow, it's about 40%. So this is also, let's say, somewhat a good sign that there is some sort of skepticism there. And I think this should be also, supported.
So the situation in Sweden?
Well, I don't think that Sweden's that different from other countries here. Of course, we have a problem with disinformation being spread on social media platforms, on gaming platforms. At the same time, I think a lot of young people are learning to differentiate what is real and what is someone spreading misinformation. They are learning this from a very young age because they are using social media and gaming platforms from such a young age. They're learning to not talk to strangers online. They are learning to recognize what is a bot and what is not, and what someone is spreading misinformation.
Right. Jaisalmer.
So we have a few more questions for each of the panelists, but maybe we can continue with a more general question. So people are curious to know how we could improve health literacy through social media, and in relationship to that, how can we make health content, like good quality health content, trendy online? And I guess this somehow connects to the previous question, because you've been talking about similarity being a crucial factor for credibility. So how can we be more relatable, I guess?
Okay, health literacy. I keep hearing about this word, but I'm never quite sure what it means. Can anybody tell me what it means? Because, I live in a country where, if you look at the OECD data, this is 10 years ago when the standard measure was the ability to find a plumber in the Yellow Pages telephone directory in the old days when we had telephone directories. And 28% of the adult population could not do that. So it wasn't health literacy was the problem, it was literacy was the problem. So I'm just wondering, what do we mean by health literacy, and can all of these things help, or do they just want to start off by improving literacy?
I'm going to come with the mental health literacy, which is where we come with. So take 4 years ago, before COVID, very few people understood what mental health was. Mental health, was, everybody assumed was anxiety, depression. It was the sort of polar opposites of the scale. Now, through resources, through conversation, through talking about it, the mental health literacy, that all comes under. So anything you see in schools, anything you see on social media, anything you see in websites, newspapers, TV, is literacy. It is educational. And now the meaning of mental health is actually the same as physical health. It is how you think, feel, and act. And mental health can be good, it can be bad. And I think that's the mental health literacy, is the educational, the kind of the physical and the digital resource and education of certain terminology.
Great, thanks, András.
So maybe I grab some time.
Oh, please, sorry, I just need a glass of water to keep me going here.
On this topic, and stop me if I'm getting too preachy. First of all, with a loving smile, if 300 billion views, it's not trending, I don't know what's trending. So it's already trending. trending is not age specific.
I know. You know.
And to that note, I feel very good on this panel because this is the only time in the year somebody refers to me as a young person with a generation gap. Very polite of you. So coming back, very practical. It's already there. It's super trending. What Conor says, I can only second that when it comes to mental health. And all the other health topics. So it's a humongous topic on social. And also what we would call preventive health, which in the traditional Western, statutory health systems, we do reactive health. You have an issue, you get to the doctor, then it happens. It's not preventive. So it's already trending. The challenge is, and that's a very positive challenge, a lot of doctors or health professionals are already learn to do very engaging content. He found himself being very popular all of a sudden, so he has a way to engage people. What my work is sometimes with institutions is, or intergovernmental organizations is, in a lovingly joking way, we say the most authoritative are oftentimes the least engaging. Why is that? Because health is a language spoken on an academic level. And let me add an appendix, which I think is very important. When we look at health literacy, meaning that it's not what it is, but what we want it to be, is we want better informed public, we want better informed patients. And when we look at the public health system now, give you a German number, the statistic time a patient with a statutory health insurance can stay with a doctor is 4.3 minutes. Including who are you, what's your name, what's your problem, and goodbye, here's your prescription. So the doctor has no time to even properly do what he wants to do with the patients, leave alone teach them on the subject matter. What does the platforms have? Unlimited time. So what we see is now that a lot of the German biggest hospitals are creating, expanding the anamnestic room into videos, teaching their patients before the patient sees them about the, let's say, cardiology. What is the spectrum of cardiologic diseases? What are we going to do with you when you show up in the office? This is the way we diagnose. This is the way we treat. Here, go to a digital anamnestic form and fill out the 20 most common questions a cardiologist will ask you in the session, and then the 4.2 minutes have changed. So think of it that way.
So I'm going to shamelessly do a little plug for my podcast series, because I think this point about medical communication or health worker communication is important. If you want to go to Spotify or whatever, Inspiring Doctors, where I interviewed a load of people who had, most of them doctors, one a television doctor, an actor, Steve McGann, who, if you know the British programme called The Midwife, was using that as a medium. He's also a health communicator. And these were people who, a young doctor who had won MasterChef and was now writing cookery books with health messages all the way through them. Another doctor who was using illustrated comic books about the life of doctors, and other ones who were using poetry and things like that. And of course, there's a long tradition from Chekhov, Somerset Maugham, and so on, of health workers who've used this. So just, I'm digressing. It's not social media. Some of it is, but you might find it interesting. András.
Well, to answer how to create a video, to create a 1 minute video, it takes me about 7 to 8 hours. And the most important part is the first 3-5 seconds. Yeah. Because people, you know much better than me, that people decide this in almost immediately. Do they want to watch the video or not? You have to find the hot topics also. I have a strategy to talk about hot topics and not so hot topics, but very important ones. And I keep it's a little bit cheating, cheat code to the algorithm. But as a health professional, is very important to talk about important, not just catchy topics. So Also, I had an anti-tobacco campaign. It was a very hot topic because of this new disposable vaping tobacco products. So I built up a strategy with the 5 videos, and it reached about 4.2 million views without advertisement, without anything. These are pure organic views. But it was a long journey. When I created my first video and I learned the text, I learned how to use the camera and cut the video, everything. and I recorded, and my wife just said, it's not okay, it's not good. I said, why? Because it's ununderstandable. I cannot understand this. And they said, why? Because of these words. And she just started to say the words, that appendices and everything. And at that moment I realized that our language is absolutely different, because we use these medical words during the med school, and afterwards we have friends who are doctors, nurses, and these words are just common words to us, but not to the public. So we have to translate these words, translate our thoughts, and to compress everything in a 1-minute video, not longer. And it's very difficult and very hard.
Thanks.
And I must mention that we started a science and health communication course at Semmelweis University. I was one of the founder lecturers, because I think it's very important to teach, because it's learnable. So you can learn this, but it takes time. So we can help to the next generation to learn these techniques, because together we are stronger, and we can reach much many more people, and we can have a bigger impact. And it is how we can fight against the misinformations.
Thank you, Kathrin.
Yeah. So sorry, I stay away from the water. András, kudos to you that you did that. But I also believe that it's not to the healthcare individual that it's their responsibility to create, let's say, online content. I think it's also the responsibility in a day-to-day context to be able to communicate properly on a high level from a health communication perspective. But I want to add a different perspective to that. That's also my part here, right? So I need to add some nuance to the discussion. Sure. So what we see is a trend also of, because the videos are so short, right? It's 30 seconds, so 1 minute, you need a hook. They need to be catchy. And they are watched in between some other entertaining content. Very often, it's not only in intentional search, but also incidental exposure. That we see some sort of trivialization and a glamorization of mental health issues. So 10 hidden signs of ADHD. So we all have ADHD, right? We all have apparently burnout, and we all experience anxiety. So what's happening is that there is, especially in the context of mental health, what we observe right now, there's anecdotal evidence. I'll start with a pretty large 1 million project in December to really investigate this, to see whether there is this increasing, well, let's say, self-diagnosis and over-interpretation of mental health issues, and even to some extent that some people feel like they need to have some mental health issues because apparently everybody's having it. Although, so that there appears to be that it is somehow trendy to have a mental health issue, and I see this a problem, and especially then some overestimation or over-interpretation of maybe common symptoms of stress and anxiety. Your friend who has never called someone or picked up a phone, well, I also experienced that. So it's just a normal process when you grow up. So I would also challenge that.
So there was a British comedian on the radio the other day, and he'd been at the Edinburgh Festival, and it was an open mic comedy session, and he was 5th in the line, and he had his spiel worked out, and he was starting off by saying, I've got ADHD, and he was going to joke about it. But every one of the previous 4 had said exactly the same thing. So, this is the challenge. He thought, that's ruined that. But please add to this very rich discussion.
Just one short comment that it is why it is important to give information and educate, but not give health advices. So I always highlight that my videos are not how to say that to diagnose anybody, but I highlight to gain more information and to visit a specialist, because you cannot diagnose yourself.
True. Yeah. True,
so it is very important.
Yeah, but that's what's happening. If you look at the comments, then say, I tick all 5 boxes, that's me.
I need to let, you haven't had a chance to speak, and I'm also conscious that we've got a slightly imbalanced panel, gender-wise, with me not helping. So we'll bring you in a minute. I will just respond quickly, and then we'll bring you in. And then Caroline Costings is going to come in with a question from the floor from EuroHealthNet in a minute. But please, Aya.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not forgetting about you.
No, of course, but I think there's a bit of a different space also in gaming, but there's a very important health factor in there as well. Again, to consider that a lot of children are using gaming spaces. What we can see in gaming and social media, that makes it easier to communicate is the screen.
Yeah.
That if I don't see you, I think it's a lot more easier to talk. I'm quite nervous here with all these people here, but if I just close my eyes, it would be a lot easier. And that is kind of the same concept with gaming as well. But that is also, however, a double-edged sword. That way, if we come back to disinformation and spreading misinformation here, I think it's a lot easier when there is no one controlling these spaces. When there is no, like, for example, in soccer, there is a judge, or what do you say? A referee. A referee. In games, we don't have a referee. So that is kind of, again, a problem where, it's important. I want to bring out this point before the times run out.
Yeah, because,
I think it's important for adults to be engaged in what children are doing online, and to ask the questions of who they are meeting and who they are talking to. Because as a parent, if your child is playing in a soccer game, or they're training in soccer, and they have a 7 morning practice, you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
It's annoying, but you're going to be there anyway, because you have to support your child. Yeah. So why aren't these parents being at these gaming conventions as well with these children? Why aren't they supporting these type of activities as well? I think that's an interesting point to raise.
It is actually a very interesting point. Now, I've done a terrible job of facilitating this because we have basically run out of time. So what I'm going to ask you for in a minute is any comments rather than questions, because we don't have time for answers. And again, Caroline, if you have a comment rather than a question.
Yes, me. I wanted to also highlight here that we have an opportunity, because Ursula von der Leyen wants us to look more into social media and the impact of on mental health of young people. It's actually with 2 commissioners, on the health commissioner and also the commissioner on intergenerational fairness. And my question to the panel would have been, but it's at the end, but I think it's an opportunity for all of us to think, okay, what do we want the European Commission to do? What regulations should we have? Kathrin, you talked about regulations, so I think it's an exciting time on this topic ahead of us to do more, and that's what I want to say.
So we are really fortunate in having a parliamentarian who will be holding the commissioners to account. So András, I hope you're taking notes of all of the questions that you will be asking at the hearings. Please, any comments rather than questions?
Yeah, we have a few comments. So, for example, for Aya, people were very interested in learning more about the potential of gaming social environments to kind of control for the proliferation of extremism, political extremisms. Then also, I think there were a couple of comments in relationship to the need to differentiate between testimonies online, something Kathrin touched on, and legit mental health care advice. We have, if you've been recommended to undergo a knee surgery, you can talk to another patient who's gone under the same procedure to understand how it went, but you wouldn't ask that person to perform the surgery on your knees. Why do we do that with mental health, you know? And that was basically, then there were also some comments about how we could promote online good quality content instead of just restricting access to potentially harmful content. So that was it from the online chat.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, quite clearly, what am I carrying a microphone for? I don't need one. Quite clearly, we could be talking about this all day, but I'm also conscious that there is a welcome reception, which many of you would be much rather be at. And those of you who have questions can ask them to our illustrious panel of speakers at the welcome reception or on the way to it, because it is really important, and I say this to some of my colleagues who seem to have forgotten it, to stick to time at these things, because otherwise they just drift on, and you're rushing between things. And I'm not going to do that because I'm very well disciplined. Can I just thank all of our participants, all of our panelists, and I'm sure you can follow up with them afterwards. Thank you very much. I just need to